Up the Down Staircase. Brainstem. Part 2. The transverse section of the upper part of the pons passes through the motor and principal sensory nuclei of the trigeminal nerve. Besides these, there is the superior olivary nucleus, which is also known as superior olivary complex. The white matter at this level consists of medial longitudinal fasciculus, medial, trigeminal, spinal, and lateral lemnisci, and trapezoid body. Midbrain is divided into tectum, which lies dorsal to the level of the cerebral aqueduct, and cerebral peduncles, which lie ventral to this level and are divided into tegmentum, substantia nigra, and cerebral crus. The structure of the cerebral crus is the same at all levels of the midbrain. It possesses temporo-parieto-occipito-pontine, frontopontine fibers, and pyramidal tract between them. The substantia nigra lies dorsal and medial to the cerebral crus at all levels. It appears dark in unstained sections, as neurons within it contain a pigment, neuromelanin. The substantia nigra is divided into two parts: dorsal, pars compacta, and ventral, pars reticularis. The pars compacta contains dopaminergic and cholinergic neurons, the pars reticularis GABAergic neurons. The substantia nigra is functionally connected with the corpus striatum. Dopamine produced by neurons in the substantia nigra passes along their axons to the striatum. At the level of the inferior colliculus, the gray matter is also presented by nuclei of inferior colliculus, mesencephalic nucleus of trigeminal nerve, and nucleus of trochlear nerve. The nuclei of the inferior colliculus present an integration center of the auditory pathway and are divided into core, central nucleus, and shell. The central nucleus of the inferior colliculus is organized into a series of laminae orthogonal to the tonotopic progression. It is noteworthy that tonotopy is a hallmark and fundamental organizational principle of the auditory system. Tonotopy means the mapping between sound frequency and spatial position at every relay structure of the auditory pathway. That is, it means that cells responsive to different frequencies are found in different places at each level of the central auditory system. The tonotopic organization is evident at the level of the cochlea, spiral ganglion, cochlear nuclei, and especially clearly due to the presence of laminae in the inferior colliculus. The central nucleus is composed primarily of neurons with disc-shaped dendritic trees confined to one lamina and arranged into parallel arrays. The second type of cells is the stellate neurons with branched spherical-shaped dendritic trees that cross over several laminae. The central nucleus receives ascending auditory inputs and sends nerve fibers via the medial geniculate body to the primary auditory cortex in the temporal lobe, thus being exclusively auditory. The shell covers the central nucleus on its dorsal and caudal aspects. The dorsal part, dorsal cortex, consists of 4 layers. Neurons of every layer usually send dendrites into the other layers. Neurons from the 4th layer send a major part of their dendrites into the central nucleus. The caudal part of the shell is similar to the dorsal one. The nuclei of the shell, besides auditory inputs, receive non-auditory, ascending somatosensory and descending cortical inputs. The cerebral aqueduct is surrounded by central gray matter. The region between the substantia nigra and the central gray matter is occupied by the reticular formation. It consists of intermingled neurons and nerve fibers and extends throughout the whole brainstem, caudally to the cervical segments of the spinal cord, rostrally to the diencephalon. Neurons of the reticular formation are organized in nuclei which are interconnected. The nuclei are arranged into 3 longitudinal columns. The median column lies next to the midline and consists of intermediate-sized neurons. The nuclei of this column are termed rough nuclei. The medial column consists of large and medium-sized neurons. That is why it is also called magnocellular column. The lateral column consists of small neurons, hence it is also called parvocellular column. The reticular formation receives information from most of the sensory systems, for example, from the optic and auditory systems, through tactile reticular fibers, from olfactory and limbic systems, through a variety of descending pathways. The reticular formation has efferent connections with almost all the levels of the CNS. The ascending pathways to the cortex form the ascending reticular activating system, which plays a crucial role in maintaining alertness and consciousness. The reticular formation has descending pathway to the spinal cord via the reticulospinal tract, which ensures somatic motor control. Besides this, the reticular formation has modulatory functions involving cardiovascular and respiration control, control of receptivity of sensory and organs, and threshold of central sensory pathways, pain modulation, control of sleep, and emotions. At the level of superior colliculus, the gray matter is presented by the red nucleus, the nucleus of superior colliculus, the mesencephalic nucleus of the trigeminal nerve, and nuclei of the oculomotor nerve. The red nucleus is pale pink due to the high vascular supply and presence of iron-containing pigment in its neurons. It has caudal, magnocellular part, prominent in lower species but small in humans, and rostral, parvocellular part. It is an integrating and relay center on the following neural pathways: cortico-rubrospinal, cortico-rubronuclear, and cerebello-rubrospinal. The red nucleus and substantia nigra are the centers of the extrapyramidal motor system. The white matter at this level is presented by medial longitudinal fasciculus, medial trigemital and spinal lemnisci, dorsal and ventral tegmental decussations. Medial longitudinal fasciculus is a composite tract that retains its position relative to the central gray matter throughout the midbrain, pons, and cranial part of the medulla oblongata. Its fibers arise mainly from vestibular nuclei, nucleus of lateral lemniscus, and interstitial nucleus of Cajal. The latter is located at the junction of midbrain and diencephalon. The fibers of medial longitudinal fasciculus interconnect the nuclei of the oculomotor, trochlear, abducens, and accessory nerves. The chief function of medial longitudinal fasciculus is to coordinate the movements of the eyes, head, and neck in response to stimulation of the vestibulocochlear nerve. The superior colliculus consists of 7 layers, or laminae, which are divided in 3 superficial, 2 intermediate, and 2 deep layers. Lamina 1, or zonal layer, or stratum zonale, is a thin layer consisting of small horizontal neurons and myelinated nerve fibers. Lamina 2, or superficial gray layer, or stratum griseum superficiale, contains neurons of various shapes and sizes. Lamina 3, or optic layer, or stratum opticum, consists mainly of axons coming from the optic tract. The superficial layers respond to bilateral retinal inputs and are purely sensory. Lamina 4, or intermediate gray layer, or stratum griseum intermedium, is the thickest layer and possesses many neurons. Lamina 5, or intermediate white layer, or stratum album intermedium, consists mainly of nerve fibers from various sources. Lamina 6, or deep gray layer, or stratum griseum profundum, consists of loosely arranged neurons. And lamina 7, or deep white layer, or stratum album profundum, consists entirely of nerve fibers. The intermediate and deep layers receive sensory inputs from vision, auditory, and somatosensory pathways and are associated with motor function as well as multisensory integration. The nuclei of the oculomotor, trochlear, and abducens nerves receive projections from the superior colliculus. Moreover, the deep neck muscles via motor nuclei are stimulated by the superior colliculus, which enables the production of the so-called gaze shift. The latter is composed of combined head and eye movements rather than eye movements per se. The superior colliculus, being connected with auditory pathways via the inferior colliculus, orient the head and eyes towards stimuli that are seen and heard. This behavior, termed orienting, allows the eyes and ears to get information about external stimuli. This is the main function of the superior colliculus. In processing of visual information, it plays a secondary role. Thank you for attention.